Welcome back to the news channel of Nghe An Newspaper and radio and television on YouTube platform. Here, we share and interact with the hottest and newest issues that the public at home and abroad is interested in. And here are some notable contents.
On September 16th, U.S. President Donald Trump continued to call for a solution to the Russia-Ukraine war, asserting that President Volodymyr Zelenskiy would eventually have to come to an agreement with Moscow. Trump, who has repeatedly urged direct dialogue between Mr. Zelensky and Russian President Vladimir Putin to end the fighting, previously stated that he would need to directly attend to bring the two sides together. In a speech to the press as he left Washington for London, England, Mr. Trump repeatedly emphasized that Mr. Zelensky would have to make an agreement to bring the Russia-Ukraine war to an end on the same day. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that President Trump would likely meet President Zelensky next week in New York to continue discussing ways to end the Russia-Ukraine war. The meeting will take place on the occasion of world leaders gathering in New York from May 22nd to attend the annual high-level session of the United Nations General Assembly. Rubio said Trump was trying to do everything he could to end the fighting. The president has had several phone calls with Putin, several meetings with Zelensky, and may meet again next week in New York. On the Russian side, Putin said he was ready in principle to meet Zelensky and suggested the Ukrainian leader could come to Moscow for talks. However, the KF has denied that it would accept such unreasonable proposals. In addition, Putin's team also questioned Zelenskyy's legitimacy and doubted whether dialogue with the Ukrainian leader would be meaningful. Zelenskyy's presidential term ends in May 2024, but because Ukraine is under martial law, elections cannot be held.
According to the Financial Times, on September 15th, a federal jury in F.C. Myers, Florida, USA, convicted Cluston L. 35, a former U.S. soldier who fought against Russia in Ukraine, of murder and violating the Neutrality Act. Lang was also convicted of conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, and causing injury abroad. The indictment stated that in 2018, Lang and accomplice Alex Hofer lured a couple Serapin Danny Lorenzo and Diana Lorenzo to the town of Estero, Florida, and murdered them. The two men fired more than 50 shots, robbed $3,000 to use as funding to go to Venezuela to incite a coup, overthrowing President Nicolas Maduro. Sue Huifover, also a former soldier who fought in the country, was sentenced to life in prison last year for murder and violating the Neutrality Act. The case attracted international attention not only because of its violent nature but also because it warned of the dangers posed by Western gunmen with extremist ideologies after fighting abroad.
On the evening of September 15th, the KFB newspaper reported that Ukraine's publicly declared campaign to destroy Russia's entire oil production capacity last weekend directly targeted St. Petersburg. Accordingly, drone attacks hit an oil refinery. Oil tankers under sanctions, as well as the port where they were anchored, along with a train carrying fuel, were targeted in a daring raid on Russia's rear. Starting late on the night of the 12th, control units of Ukraine's 14th Drone Regiment launched one of the largest swarm air raids since the beginning of the conflict. Over the next 4 hours, 220 to 230 long-range drones were launched at multiple targets across Russia. Around 30 kamikaze drones flew towards the northwestern Linkarat region shortly after midnight, successively diving into the Primo oil pumping station. The type of device used in this attack has not been announced. In previous attacks at a distance of over 800 kilometers, Ukraine often used UJ-2 Lyuty, a propeller-driven precision drone carrying a 75 kilograms, 165 pounds warhead. The Primo facility receives crude oil piped from inland Russia and then transfers it to the nearby Ust Luga port, where the oil is pumped onto tankers belonging to Moscow's Dark Fleet. Ust Luga is a major energy export gateway for the Russian Federation via the Baltic Sea. Regional Governor Alexanderko reassured constituents in a telegram message that all but 2 drones had been shot down and ground damage was minimal, affirmed that the authorities had the situation under control. However, Russian media, citing local sources, reported that Ukrainian drones had hit and damaged 2 giant oil tankers anchored at the Primo berth, as well as the Zen oil pumping system onto a smaller ship. The ships were identified as the Custo, flying the Sierra Leone flag, with a deadweight of 105,000 tons, the Cayenne, flying the Sierra Leone flag, with a deadweight of 109,000 tons, and the FF, flying the Hong Kong, China flag, with a deadweight of 51,000 tons. According to data from the monitoring group marinetraffic.com, as of the 15th, all three ships had not moved from the Primo port since the 12th. Video footage of an attack showed an unidentified oil tanker being hit midship. This was followed by a fierce orange explosion. According to industry reports, the Custo suffered the most severe damage, forcing 28 crew members to abandon ship, with no casualties reported. Also on the 15th, the Ukrainian military information monitoring group Sty News reported that 2 of the 4 berths, including berths 1 and 3, at Primo port had been out of operation since the 12th. Additionally, the Custo was confirmed to be fully loaded when it was hit. Ukrainian energy journalist Petro Antyushchenko commented that damage to the pipeline and pumping equipment on shore may have halved Primo's oil pumping capacity. Ship tracking data reviewed by the KBO newspaper confirmed a sharp decrease in vessel traffic at the port. The Custo and Cujuan, part of the Dark Fleet, are subject to sanctions by the UK, the European Union (EU), and Canada. These ships are used by Russia to circumvent oil embargoes. The Kremlin accused Ukrainian frogmen of carrying out magnetic mine attacks on Russian oil tankers, with underwater explosions previously hitting ships anchored in Turkish ports, Uslisavon, Italy, and off the coast of Libya. Kiev did not officially claim responsibility, but Ukrainian intelligence officials declared that Russia's dark fleet of tankers would be attacked anywhere and anytime possible. The Primo attack marked the first time Ukraine was confirmed to have used long-range drones to directly attack sanctioned Russian oil tankers. 2 nights later, on the 14th, Ukraine continued to launch 80 to 90 drones to attack multiple targets across Russia. At least 3 of them hit the Kurishi oil refinery, about 100 kilometers southeast of St. Petersburg. This plant processes 17 to 20 million tons of oil per year, accounting for about 6% of Russia's total refining capacity. It is the main source of petroleum products for St. Petersburg and the surrounding regions of Leningrad, Novgorod, and Pskov. At least 2 drones struck the main distillation tower, causing a mushroom cloud explosion. Firefighters reported that the fire was extinguished within the day. Governor Alexander Drozdenko stated that all Ukrainian drones were shot down and debris from one caused a small fire that was quickly put out. However, satellite images analyzed by the DSB newspaper showed structural damage to the plant's storage tanks and processing areas. In another blow to St. Petersburg's energy infrastructure, the Security Service of Ukraine, SBU, and the main Directorate of Intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, HUR, blew up a fuel-laden train running on the Orange St. Petersburg line on the night of May 13 to 14, 2025. To the attack, 2 train crew members died and another railway worker was seriously injured. The explosion crippled the vital 2-way railway line for at least 24 hours. HUR stated that the mines were placed on the tracks by special forces operating behind enemy lines. Images on local media showed the locomotive and 15 fuel cars heavily damaged and derailed. On the evening of May 14, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy declared that the most effective and fastest-acting sanctions were the fires at Russian oil refineries, ports, and oil depots. "We have significantly limited the oil industry of the Russian Federation, and that means limiting the conflict. Russia's war is closely tied to oil, gas, and other energy sources." Thank the SBU Special Forces for successfully completing their mission in Primorsk, striking Russia's largest oil port on the Baltic Sea. Very significant damage has been confirmed. The port of Primorsk on the Baltic Sea has a capacity of 50 to 60 million tons of oil per year. The nearby U.S. Teluga export port has a capacity of 30 million tons. In peacetime, these 2 ports handle about 15% of Russia's total seaborne energy exports, valued at $20 to $30 billion per year. Reports from the Russian energy industry acknowledge that recent Ukrainian attacks have reduced this output by about half. Last August, Ukraine launched a drone attack campaign, prioritizing the destruction of energy infrastructure. Since then, there have been at least 45 attacks, hitting about 22 oil and gas production, storage, or transportation facilities. more than major railway junctions, as well as defense industrial facilities, airports, and Russian military command posts, have also been attacked. Kremlin officials accuse Ukraine of attacking Russian civilians. As of mid-month, retail fuel shortages, soaring gasoline prices, and even many empty gas stations have been reported in the Far East, Siberia, Central and Eastern, as well as southwestern Russia, the Volga River Basin, and the outskirts of Moscow and St. Petersburg.
On September 15th, Ukraine's Pravda reported that the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Alexander Sisky, had dismissed Vladimir Zelenskiy and Maxim Katuchin, the commanders of the 17th and 20th Army Corps. This was the first high-ranking personnel change since President Vladimir Zelensky announced the transformation of the Ukrainian Armed Forces into a corps structure. Ukraine's Pravda said that commanders Zelenskiy and Katuchin were dismissed 1 to 2 weeks ago after the areas they commanded suffered losses against the Russian army. Specifically, Mr. Zelenskyy's 17th Army Corps is responsible for the frontline area south of Zaporizhia, where the Ukrainian army lost control of the village of Kamyansky and was partially pushed back from Platin. Both areas are located along the river the Nro. Meanwhile, Katuchin's 20th Army Corps is deployed along the border between Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk provinces, which Russian troops crossed for the first time last August. Also on September 15th, the Kyiv Independent reported that Ukraine's digital transformation minister, Mykhailo Fedor, announced that the country's PR-1 defense industrial cluster had completed the final stage of testing a new suicide UAV with a range of more than 40 kilometers. The new UAV is designed to counter Russian electronic warfare systems and will soon be tested in combat. Mr. Fedorov said the suicide UAV with a range of 40 kilometers is capable of overcoming electronic warfare systems and represents a new level of capability for attacking the enemy. Electronic warfare has become one of Russia's key defenses against Ukraine's UAV arsenal. Jamming is aimed at preventing UAVs from attacking targets. If Ukraine's new UAV proves to be resilient to Russian electronic warfare, it could improve Moscow's ability to attack logistics centers, artillery positions, and equipment behind its lines. Attack UAVs are becoming an economical and practical solution for the front line, Mr. Fedorov added. They are affordable and easy to scale up. Kyiv has rapidly expanded its UAV development program since the Russia-Ukraine conflict erupted in February 2022. President Zelenskiy said in June this year that Ukraine could produce 8 million UAVs a year but lacked the financial resources to achieve this goal.